Good points. Good points. Yes, sir.
I think in the past years associated with religious Christian interfaith roots that takes the social justice, the environmental justice into what is called the equal justice, pertaining that the injustices in the environment affects, all of humanity, particularly indigenous peoples there, marginalized peoples there. And that institutions, societies, must look at the effects on all of creation, all the natural resources, because the impacts on that affect all of society. So the term equal justice is used, and for those who advocate for it.
Is there a website you could give us on that?
One of the websites is Equal Justice, equaljustice.com. Reverend Peter Sotel is the United Church of Christ minister. His background is as an ecologist, and so he was with others to promote equal justice concept. Another would be Green Faith, where it involves interfaith groups throughout the country dealing with the environment. And of course, we have now the Interfaith Power and Light.
Interesting.
That probably came to be maybe about over 14, 15 years ago. And it deals with the energy, climate change, from a religious interfaith perspective.
Seems like the Pope, speaking of the Catholic Church, is coming up with some interesting social justice principles as he's coming up. I was the one that recommended running for Pope. I wanted to run for Pope. And the plan I had was, my first act would be to make everyone a Pope. So for $49, you could send in and you get, the mitre, the hat, and the ring, and the cane, and everyone could be a Pope. And, and then we could, really democratize the Pope, the church, the Catholic. A potpourri, right. As we approach a closing time here, are there any comments before we close? We'll kind of make some summary remarks, and then we'll do our traditional closing, standing in the river. Any comments from anyone? Yes, ma'am.
I was just kind of wondering, talk about social justice, that there really are a set of principles that validate people having the right conditions to be able to live their life, and that we have an environment supporting that. For me, I kind of got a little bit of a tick here when you mentioned unions, because I'm probably, this is just my own personal thing, I'm probably a little bit more on the conservative as it has to do with unions, and that's just my own experience.
Sure.
Living in the state,
Yeah.
how I think unions have become really embedded in the state system, so that there's no difference to me, whoever is governed, it doesn't matter, it's all union. And so and I don't necessarily see social justice with that,
Yep.
that's just kind of a tick for me.
Sure. Sure. Yeah.
Yeah, so, when we talk social justice, if we keep it to the principles, those conditions, versus aligning with particular kinds of organizations, that we kind of,
Alienate some people.
or muddy the waters,
A response to, thank you, first of all, but any response? Yes?
Yeah, I mean, we talk a lot about history, and I think the history of labor unions is one, is very proud of history.
Proud history. right here we have, and I'm glad, you know, you're taking time to express your different view of what's going on. I think historically there is a proud tradition. I think framing it with a couple of points in mind is what are the benefits of organized labor, where the workers have a right and say in the distribution of the resources, the services, and the monetary rewards. You know, it's clear that the gap, the economic gap in this country represents a serious injustice. The second principle, I think, is one in which the rank and file members of unions need to do what any democratic organization or society does, which is to keep the leadership accountable. Frankly, I don't see enough of that being done in ACA. I see that there's a general acceptance that once you're elected, you never are supposed to critique a person's performance, even if that performance is contrary to the bylaws of ACA or CSJ or any organization. And I think that's part of the, what do they call it, the herd mentality, you kind of go with it. Brother David talked about Dr. King's statement that in Dante's Inferno, that the hottest places in hell is left for those, is reserved for those people who say nothing in times of distress. But it's this sort of discussion that is real important for at least CSJ to engage in. And I'm glad it was brought to the table. Personally, I would like to bring that myself to the board. And as we begin to clarify who we are, what we stand for. And you're not alone being a little bit on the side of conservative. And certainly we don't want to get into denigrating personalities. We want to look at principles that people come forth. And I find too often in our field, there's such a focus on personalities rather than the principles on which these folks are, who are criticized, stand for. But thank you very much for bringing that up. Yeah.
The other thing I want to say is that what I was hoping to also get out of the meeting today was to just talk about I'm having trouble reconciling being in Hawaii, being at the Hilton, supporting the dominant occupying country, flying in and seeing the military airplanes, knowing that I don't belong here, and yet, I'm spending all this money that goes to the U.S. economy that's occupying here. So I'm very conflicted, and I wish we had time in this forum or maybe somewhere else to talk about that, because I think to me, that's a discussion that is important, because then it's showing our awareness that we are aware that we're social justice. I'm a social justice advocate, and I know that I'm conflicted with this because of the environment, because of the oppression that's happening here.
I share.
And yet I still need to, sleep somewhere.
Right, yeah.
But I always wish I had a home of a Native person to sleep in instead of the Hilton. I really hate staying there. So, and yet, the conference is supporting this conference center. All those things.
I think
I know we don't have enough time.
I think
It's not a perfect world, is it?
yeah, but I think there's something to be said for people who have conscience to feel guilty about their positions of privilege. I think it's healthy. I think if you take away any propensity for guilt, and we all have these psychopathic, tendencies that go out. What I find is that, okay, if we're in a privileged group, right, and I have more privileges going for me in this society than you do, but you do, how do we use those privileges to minimally initiate conversations about what's going on? For instance, the whole idea of Native Hawaiian sovereignty. To me, it makes invaluable sense from a moral perspective as a white person, particularly as a white person, whose people are responsible for what's going on here, is to routinely bring up the issue of sovereignty and, respectfully state, hey, this is my position on it. It's well past the time to make sure the kingdom is restored. So how do we use our privilege is, I think, an important issue. When we go to Orlando, that will be on other sacred land of Native American Indians. Will anyone in the governing council bring up, we have had a tradition of asking permission to have the conference there and to have a member of the Native American Indian group come and, make a statement. So I think there are different things that we can do to make it a perfect world. Yes, sir.
I have two things to say. I mean, the first thing is kind of interesting that Jen was talking about tolerance.
Yep.
And I was telling this young lady here that I was on the bus this morning, and there was this gentleman playing his radio loud. I said, do you have the earplugs? No, my friend has them. I said, well, you do know, that affects people on the bus. And he just ignored me, and he kept on turning it louder. And I'm thinking, here's this youngster disrespecting someone, myself. that's in itself a no-no. But then the thing that was interesting was that I looked at him again and I said, excuse me, you're really testing my tolerance, aren't you? And then he said, excuse me, may I move? I said, you certainly may. Stood up, went beyond, went to the front, turned it up even louder. And I just kept on thinking, oh my gosh, this is the kind of stuff, and they don't realize how sacred this place is. And because again, Hawaii is built on silence, that connection to the spirit beyond is quiet. It's not of noise, and all that's happened is nothing but noise. So very sacrilegious, very uncomfortable for me. And another thing that I've always questioned was, I know I'm connected with the Pacific Justice and Reconciliation Center, Dr. Lawson and Dr. Patterson. And I remember having a conversation with them recently, and I said, the three pictures you have up, you have Queen Bhumibol Adulyadej, you have Martin Luther King, and you have Mahatma Gandhi. I want Martin Luther King's picture removed. I said, because the disconnect, these other two were of their own cultures, in their own homeland, defending what needs to be made homeland. Martin Luther King and all the whites that have done whatever they've done to the American Indians should not be acknowledged as something that should prevail. I mean, just to go to Canada, U.S., and to have the average white man or dark person think that I'm an American Indian, which no problem with me, or I'm an extra big wetback that has crossed over the border. Zero problem with me. I understand where they're coming from, but it's so disrespectful to the American Indian not to understand the hidden passes, my brothers and sisters. And if you dismiss them in their own homeland, I'm knowing you're doing the same to me in my own homeland here. So for myself, I have a twist of not quite accepting Martin Luther King as a hero in the coming to the U.S. And even Mr. Brownridge, the head of the St. Andrew's Church, recently asked me, Queen Emma's birthday was held on January 2nd, and I went to Mauna Awa, the burial place for our Ali'i. And there was something that happened there. There was this young man, I walked up to him and I said, I love your Hawaiian look. And then he looks at me and says, Uncle, I love your food that you have. He says, would you honor me by blowing the food, and I will hold it for Queen Emma. So we did it together. And so Dr. Brownridge, a few weeks later, came up to me and said, Kalani, that was absolutely beautiful. Was that part of the program? I says, no, it wasn't. It wasn't? It was so beautiful. you know, this bothers me is your promotion of Martin Luther King here in my Hawaii. I says, isn't that interesting? Another person using their own agenda to dismiss my people, my own homeland. And so it was a very interesting thing. And then, but again, that's the kind of stuff. People are not quite connecting with the significance of my homeland. It's not to be used just as a backdrop for their agenda. And that's what I see nothing but Surya from Sri Lanka, or he's from Indonesia, I believe, down Makaha side, that has this 5-acre farmland. I don't feel the Hawaii there. But yet he's come with his own definition, whatever. And there's this aloha, there's this voyage of aloha with Mr. Epstein and Lisbeth. And here they are on the internet promoting, the Hokulea, going around the world as experts of my culture. And I look at that and I says, we have our own people that can be of the truth and just flow with that history. We don't need anyone else coming in and translating and taking credit for all of it. Yeah, people are focusing on these others. That's the kind of unbelievable I find to have to contend with. It is absolutely, it can be extremely frustrating.
I can empathize with your reaction. Let me kind of provide an alternative invitation to consider. And that is, I don't know this Roger Epstein, but I met him on 2 occasions. And, you know, I always look at how we can add drops to the bucket of justice and peace. And I find often that when we get to know each other, we find that sometimes we agree to 70% or 80%, sometimes 90%, and sometimes 98%. But I noticed that the focus is not on what we share in common, but the 2% that we disagree with. And that's something that the progressive movement has always suffered from. And so I don't know if anyone I agree 100% with. I haven't met that person yet. But you know, brother, if you and I are going to disagree on stuff, I would rather focus on what you and I agree to. And in this case, I would guess one of the things would be Hawaiian sovereignty issues. I would join you regardless of whatever percent we disagree with, because I do believe we're brothers, and I believe that we can work together. Dr. King, sometimes I chalk up, it could be an elite view, that someone that expresses love as much as he did, and his peace as much as he did, and ends up at 34 years of age having his neck blown off his shoulder, I give credit for that. Cesar Chavez, and it could be elitism. You know, the guy eventually died from all that fasting. Somehow they kind of go up on my thing. Could be elitism. I'd like to see local people be put next to Dr. King, and people in this room being put there as well. But, you know, I hope that I would have the courage that Dr. King would be to take a bullet if I was working for justice.
Well, I'm knowing whether I like it or not. I'm destined for one.
Yeah, yeah. Sometimes
I'm knowing from those that have arrived here on my shore, that are knowing that they can see things.
Yep.
I'm knowing
that's going to happen.
It's like, so for myself, I have no fear or even wherewithal of feeling anything about that.
Yep.
I'm knowing the truth that I must exercise and be of.
But,
And so that's what I know about myself.
but if we're going to achieve a unified front, I think it would be useful to acknowledge our differences, not to shelve them, but to acknowledge our differences, but to make a commitment of our essential humanity where we agree and move forward. I mean, that's just and it's okay for us to disagree, brother, you know?
No,
It is.
believe me, I'm not one of those that's put off by anyone that has.
No, I picked that up.
Any kind of a view. I mean, I'm
Yeah.
very open to it.
Yeah,
So I'm knowing that I'm very infinite when it comes to wherewithal of being able to withstand anything that's impossible to even dare think about, or even possible, that it is possible. So I'm infinite. So I'm knowing who I am.
I appreciate that much, yeah. There was someone that had a response or some thought here about this conversation. Good conversation.
My thought was about not having land and the passion
Gloria, did you have something to add?
Just to kind of wrap it into wishing that I had that here.
No, that's good, but again,
That I had that I had that copy.
Mhm.
That's like what's in here.
but you know what's nice, you can come,
Keep interrupting her.
sorry. You can come here and help me.
Well, that's my point, is that the void that I feel is not having a strong connection to any mission. And that is a difficult piece for me to reconcile within myself. Whether it would be Cuba or whether it would be US mainland foreign investment trade. So I consider myself more connected to a little space like Detroit than I do to what I really feel is like, which is Cuba, which I can't have.
No, but that's what's nice, is that kind of, truth, yes, that's good.
Real.
So, Doctor?
Yeah, what I like to see is follow-up on any type of lectures or workshop. And I like to sort of announce that every 2 years, the Church of the Crossroads has what is called the Watata Lecture Series. So this year, it's on the theme of social determinants in the healthcare system, dealing with social, political, economics. And it's in the planning process. The keynote speaker will be, and you probably know these people, Dr. Tony Eichen
No, I don't.
from the California Endowment
No, I don't.
in California. The local people in the planning committee is Kaabi Aimoku,
Mhm.
Kaholo Kala at the university.
Yeah, yeah.
Matthew Nakato, who produced the film Ola, I believe.
Oh,
Yeah, so
oh,
they're involved in the
oh,
planning.
that's great.
And so the lecture will be held in November,
Okay,
you know, so I'll keep people posted on that.
please do.
So the kinds of things that you're discussing here
Fit in.
into what will be in this lecture series. So
That's great.
And probably I'll contact FOCOM to make also a presentation dealing with the Hawaiian issues, you know, as well, history and issues.
And you're from the Crossroads.
Pardon?
You're from the Crossroads.
Yes.
Yes, thank you very much.
Also.
And many other places.
As we approach the end of today, we hope that we have, in some way, large or small, been able to address the 3 goals that we tried to achieve and articulated early in the beginning. That was 1, to gain greater insight and knowledge about the history, the oppression, the adverse impact of injustices in this native land. That we looked at ways of promoting new ways of thinking, new skills that could possibly be used, small or large ways, and to develop a sense of community amongst ourselves in this limited time that we had together. If those goals have been achieved in some way, then we have served our purpose, and I truly am grateful for you taking time to join us and trying to build on this movement. I particularly want to thank the speakers for doing a wonderful job, for the cameramen that have been here and participating, and for all of our well wishes. As we end, we normally keep mindful of the Native American Indian elder who was asked, hey, you know, you're talking about these social justice things. A guy was in the audience, was saying, he said, hey, you know, I like what you're saying, but those are like hard things to do, you know? And that one over there, that's impossible. You know, restoring the kingdom, no, that's impossible. He said, who do you think's gonna do this? Who do you think's gonna do these hard things, or the impossible things? The Native American Indian elder responded very quick. He said, you know, those who can will do the hard things. They always have. The ones that can will do that. And then he responded equally quickly by saying, those who care, they'll do the impossible things. And they always have, and they always will. And you know, as we continue to organize meetings like this across the country, my sense of hope and faith in the movement to justice gets reinforced, because we find the 5% that we add up on one thing kind of builds on. And I always leave meetings like this thinking, wow, I met some new people who who I know can, and most importantly, I meet new people who I really know care about what's happening. And with that, that keeps our struggle alive, and it keeps our movement ahead. I want to thank you personally, and for those of you who would wish we end our ritual with standing in the river, to do that, we have to stand kind of together in this circle, maybe to make it easier, we can move back there a little bit. And if, we hope you join us, but if you have to go to a meeting, we understand fully. We get into a circle here. It's called In the River. Here we can, get this out of the way. Get into a circle. We can make a circle kind of go zigzag down here if we want. We'll all line up together because we're going to join hands. I'm going to move this over here if you don't mind. Kind of do this.
I skipped
And we started with the gratitude, and now we're going to start with kind of another image. We'll do whatever is comfortable to you when we kind of do this. You can close your eyes, you can open your eyes, whatever, but if you just focus on your breath right now for the first time for 20 seconds or so, just get in touch with your own spirit. And as we get centered together through our breath, let us kind of take a little journey together as we walk in the river. We're walking together on a path that's covered with grass and fallen leaves, and we hear the torrent of the river. And we approach the river, and the torrent noise increases, and the breeze and the sun glaze our faces as we just enjoy the natural beauty of the Haina, understanding a little bit more what it means to be righteous, pono, balanced with the environment that we live in. We continue on our path as we walk towards the river. We come to the river shore. We have a chance to take off our shoes and slowly walk through the sand. You can feel the sand on your feet and between your toes, and you slowly move into the river and find it being just right temperature. Not too hot, not too cold. And we're about to walk in the river. And slowly we move into the river. And as we move into the river, we find the current picking up steam. It's a gentle feeling on our legs. The breeze continues. The sun shining on our face. And we walk in the river a little bit farther to find that the torrent is getting stronger. And we realize at that point that standing alone in the river, we can be swept away, as in the difficult times that we all experience in working for social justice. But we continue to walk in the river. We find that the river current is getting stronger. We move up, and the water climbs our legs, and we're up to our waist, and we begin feeling tugged by the water as we walk alone in the river. We feel a hand reaching down, meeting our hand, and a hand joining our hand on the other side. And without opening our eyes, we understand that all of us have walked in the river together, but we are joined together in order to withstand the fast-moving river, the torrents of life that we'll all experience. And we stand in that moment realizing that it's not about the oneness of our survival and our successes, but it's the we-ness as we walk in the river. And almost in a planned way, which wasn't planned, we walk hand in hand, being guided by the spirit of our togetherness. We feel the torrent beginning to slow down, but we realize that if we stood alone, we would have been swept away and put in danger's way. As we reach the beach, there's no words between us. We simply walk out holding hands, recognizing that our salvation, that our victories, that our successes, and our peace of mind and love in our heart is part of the journey we take walking in the river, not alone, but with others. Let us leave here being mindful of the connections that we made during this workshop and the commitment we make to continue to walk in the river of life as we face dangerous situations and struggles, recognizing that we're never alone, but connected in spirit, in heart, and in mind. And with that, we want to extend a special aloha to all of us who've just gotten done walking in the river as we prepare for the next river. Thank you very much, and have a wonderful conference. We appreciate it very much. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
If I didn't have such passion for knowing the necessity of my truth, because there's many of my island that have said not being the right man should system has done its job. Their agenda, they knew exactly what they were saying. And that's why even if you ever see that movie 12 Years a Slave,
Yeah, I actually will.
because all you need to do is put our queen's face in there. We became so white, so flawlessly white, to be flawless in the law of
Excuse me.
the international.
We'll be in touch, huh?
Oh yeah.
On the radio this weekend.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you very
Where
much
do
for
you
coming.
want us to leave the?
Oh, the evaluations can be left on the table right here. Your evaluations can be left right here. Thank you very much. Thank you for coming today.